This is Silicon Curtain. Please, after you've had a look at the video, if you like the materials, definitely please add a like, share it with your contacts, and definitely if you're not subscribed, do please subscribe to the channel to see more of the fantastic guests that we feature. Please do also check out my guest Konstantin's channel and subscribe to that because it contains absolutely extraordinary and essential information to help you understand what is going on in Russia, its economy, and the impact of sanctions. Do please also check out the validated Ukrainian charities that appear in the description of the video. And once you've done that, please do buy me a coffee or become a patron to support the work of the channel. I am delighted to welcome Konstantin back to the channel. This is our monthly conversation, and when we kicked these off, we were worried that we may not have enough to talk about. Well, that is certainly not the case, and it has not been the case for the last 11 or 12 episodes we've done. In fact, we've struggled to cram everything in. As usual, we are going to be focusing on the Russian economy, but we are also going to touch on themes that affect Putin's war with Ukraine. Now, Konstantin is one of the best-known YouTubers whose channel Inside Russia comments insightfully on Russia's descent into authoritarianism over the last few years. But looking at these themes, it becomes even more important globally because we see a global rise of authoritarianism and an authoritarian toolkit being, I think, exported to many countries around the world. So what Konstantin talks about his own country, I think has huge relevance to what is happening in many other countries, and of course to the activists who are fighting back for democracy and freedom. Konstantin, welcome back to the channel.
Jonathan, thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure being here, and let's keep on fighting the good fight.
Let's do it. I mean, eventually, I believe good things and good people will triumph, but I suspect we have many more difficult days or months to get through before we start to see the turning of the corner, as it were. But there's been some interesting news. Now, you and I watch, I think, some of the same commentators in the Russian language sphere, Vladimir Milov, Michael Naki, and many others. And there's been a flurry of videos coming out over the last couple of weeks that talk about Russia actually starting to run out of three key things to sustain its war effort. One is money, one is munitions, and the other one is manpower. What's your take on this? Is Putin starting to hit a brick wall and run out of the essential things that power his aggression?
Jonathan, on my channel, Inside Russia, and I think in our interviews quite a few times, I kept on telling that I believe that the victory for Ukraine will not come from the front lines, but will come from inside Russia. And now we start seeing the signs of that happening. And you're absolutely right. Weapons, money, and manpower. You know, I could add a few more things. Okay. For example, people's patience. They certainly start running out of that. Yesterday, protests all over southern city Krasnodar, massive protests, arrests, clashes with police, resisting police in smaller cities throughout southern Russia. You know, things like that. So definitely there are signs, definitely there are troubles, and this is the economic tsunami. I've been talking about it as well. It's not around the corner any longer. It's not out there coming very soon. No, it's right in front of us. We start seeing it. This is here. This is it.
And of course, these protests are not against the war. I know many people watching this won't have seen the footage, won't have seen the analysis of those. People are protesting that things are breaking down, including electricity supply. There are blackouts. There are all sorts of problems, you say, with supply. There are intermittent supply problems with fuel and so on, which we've talked about earlier. So these protests, are these very much people protesting for their economic kind of, I wouldn't say rights, but they're protesting against economic troubles as opposed to directly, talking about the war, mobilization, these kind of things?
You're right. But it always starts with something economic, with something that affects their personal lives. Perhaps food is getting a little too expensive, or blackouts, the no electricity for days, or public transportation doesn't work as well as it used to, things like that. So their patience, and I call people's patience could even be more important than money. Lack of weapons, well, not enough weapons and manpower, um, it gets thinner, and where it's thin, it breaks, and it can break in different places. It starts with blackouts, but then who knows where it's going to go to.
And of course, Russia is a deeply depoliticized system. For the last 2 decades, the so-called elite has discouraged people from being involved in politics, from having any agency in the political sphere. So I guess it's not surprising that when frustration bursts out, it's not going to be in a politically organized fashion, but it's going to be against, as you say, sort of economic problems. And we saw these problems in winter. I think it's been a surprise to see them in summer, but then Russia, as well as Ukraine, is facing record temperatures. Do you think this has something to do with it? That sort of equipment that's not properly being serviced, that maybe wasn't built to the highest standard, is breaking down under these sort of record-breaking summer temperatures?
First of all, one step back. When you mentioned Russian people were conditioned for 20 years not to be political, you are right on. You're absolutely right. It's just, I call it a two-step process. If you're not political, if something happens, you become political in two steps, not in one. First, there's no electricity. You get out on the streets. You see that police starts arresting people who just protesting because of electricity outage, the blackout. And then you start asking questions. What the heck is going on? Okay. And then you become political very quickly. So that's don't count on Russians not political. They're not currently not, but they can become very, very, very fast. And then speaking of the utilities, you're talking about you're talking to the right guy. I spent 20 years building power plants, big and small, throughout Russia. And our partner was Siemens, a turbine manufacturer. And I was the guy who was in charge of dealing with Siemens in our company. So I know the company quite well. I know the people who left Russia for the most part. I know the equipment. I know how they service it. And I know how sophisticated, how advanced, efficient, equipment that is. And guess what? It needs to be maintained. And it's you can't skip on maintenance. There are remonti, that's how it's called in Russia, scheduled, monthly, annual, and this. It's the entire business Siemens has built around its turbines. Okay, so when I heard that Siemens left Russia in March of 2022, I was astonished. I thought, what are they gonna do? And then Siemens, I think for some time, for 6 more months, they left the team, the service team, servicing existing power equipment. But then they left. Now they're completely out of Russia. And as the result, we start seeing problems, big problems. Now, in this past week, official propaganda, official media came out with an absolutely incredible number. I heard from the official sources over around 3 million people in Russia last week were left without electricity. Now, Russian propaganda sugarcoats always. And if they say 3 million, that means many, many, many more million. Okay. And then next thing we know, people take it to the streets in Krasnodar. In some other cities, there's unrest as well. Not as big as in Krasnodar, but hey, This is step number one. And they say that there are two reasons. First is abnormal heat. Well, you know what? I was born and grew up in the city of Rostov-on-Don in the south. It's right next to Krasnodar, 3-hour drive. And every summer in Rostov and Krasnodar in the south of Russia is just like that. 40 degrees Celsius or 105 Fahrenheit every single year for 6 weeks. So no, not gonna fly, not abnormal heat, regular heat. And things like that never happened before. Even in the USSR, we didn't have blackouts like that. And now, for the first time in history, we start seeing that something is wrong, majorly wrong in Russia.
And you combine that with inflation, and it's interesting to see IMF and other bodies quoting Gostat and the sort of standard figures. Even in those figures, inflation rate is running relatively high at 8.6, I think. But when you look at other figures that were released showing wage inflation, now this isn't my analysis, but something that Vladimir Milov was talking about. When you look at other economic indicators, it seems to suggest that real inflation is running much, much higher. In fact, anything from around sort of 14% up to I think about sort of even 34% last month. Maybe the real rate is somewhere in between. But if you look at those indicators of wage inflation and certain other baskets of consumer goods, it would suggest the real inflation rate is much higher than official stats. Now, if you go back to the Soviet Union, there's nothing too surprising about economic data being falsified. Um, do you think this is a new thing for Russia in this period since the 90s? Or do you think there's been widespread massaging of economic data? But is it getting worse? And what is the implications of it?
Of course, Russian government is the successor of the Soviet government. And if we talk about key people in the government, Vladimir Putin, where is he coming from? No, from the KGB. He graduated university in 1975. Let's look at the new Minister of Defense of Russia, Belousov. He started working for Gosplan, regulating prices when Brezhnev was still alive. And I'll give you other examples as well. Those people just go to that warehouse, go in a very dark corner out back, and they just take those guidelines, those books, very dusty, and they just clean the dust off them, and this is it. They remember in the USSR, everyone wanted to go back to the USSR so bad. That's a mystery unsolved for me. I don't understand why, but that they're definitely there, okay? And they tried to sugarcoat and hide real numbers of inflation, but it's just like the electricity. You can say that there's plenty of electricity supply everywhere, but then once you come to your house, you turn on the light and there's no electricity. They can't sugarcoat that. It's either black or white. Same thing with the food prices. You go to a store and you see that the prices change every day now. It's not galloping inflation, but it's getting there. And I remember that. I remember 1992, 1993 were tough years, and it's getting there pretty quickly. Okay, so they can't sugarcoat for long.
No, and there'll be many people who remember that period. You don't have to be that old to have lived through the hyperinflation of the 90s, and it's a deeply disturbing kind of experience. And what I think is fascinating about this is that Levada Center, which is supposed to be one of the most professional polling organizations, still operating in Russia. Of course, there's going to be restrictions on what it does, but they've recently done a survey to try to understand how many people actually want to see some kind of peace negotiations take place. That number is at a record high. It's increased dramatically. I expect it's with the hardships that we've been talking about. It's linked to that for sure. 58% of those polled say they want to see negotiations taking place that will lead to a cessation of hostilities. But that same piece of research showed that there's an extraordinary paradox here, because those same people who are asked about whether territory should be handed to Ukraine, a territory that was its sovereign territory, but of course is now under the Russian constitution has been added to Russian territory. Obviously, very few places recognize that, but it's in the Russian constitution now. Those same people who want peace negotiations also say they don't want to see Russia lose or hand back territory. So there's a kind of extraordinary paradox here, which emerges, I think, from the propagandizing and sorts of other things. Is the economic pain going to have to get really much worse before people abandon this, I would say, obsession with territory?
I think that Levada Center is legit in their polling, and they give, correct numbers, more or less. I think that what we're seeing here is mind engineering fine-tuned to perfection. Okay, because it's really hard. I'm confused myself. I try to think like Russian. I'm unusual Russian. Okay, I can't think like those people. I don't know how to combine, wanting to stop the war and keeping the lands that belong to Ukraine. That 2 years ago they weren't part of Russia. Okay, Russia annexed them in end September or end of October of 2022. I I'm confused here myself, Jonathan. But I think Levada is legit.
Yes, no, I think they do some interesting work. It's under restrictions, but I think they do attempt to do the most scientific sort of work that they can. It's not politically
The best they
motivated.
can.
Yeah, absolutely, under the circumstances, which is in itself quite something sort of interesting and special. Well, let's turn to something that perhaps is a little more positive in some ways. And we've been talking for a long time about the role of China, but some interesting stuff seems to be happening. The secondary sanctions do finally seem to be biting, not because they've become more effective or new sanctions have been introduced. It's just that the US has started to enforce them rather than just letting them slide. But it seems this pressure of secondary sanctions is actually having an impact on China. Um, it seems there are far fewer sort of financial instruments available for the to support the Russian import and export business based on yuan and based on relationships with Chinese banks. It also seems that commercial and individual credit is starting to dry up. Various businesses and individuals are finding that Chinese banks do not want to work with sanctioned Russian banks. So what's going on here? And could this actually have quite a major impact in accelerating the economic catastrophe, I think, which is awaiting the Russian economy?
It has been. It has been affecting a great deal. Again, it was really hard to miss and to undervalue the hit power of secondary sanctions. Even 2 years ago, when they started enforcing secondary sanctions bit by bit, very slowly, but it was clear that they will work one day. And what we're seeing right now is they're working at pretty much full force. Okay. Now everyone's talking about China, but no one's talking about Turkey. Turkey just fell off the radar of Russia. Russian news, Russian propaganda, as if it doesn't exist. But if you look at, if you look at, let's say, the news in December, in November of last year, not too long ago, that Turkey was all over the news. Our friend helps us to circumvent secondary sanctions. Oh, we are about to sign this wonderful contracts with Turkey. Okay, and all of a sudden comes January 1st, and then U.S. Secretary of State visits Turkey and then warns the Turkish banks, but that's it. They just stop doing business with Russians, and Russians go, oh, and they just stop talking about Turkey as if it has never existed. Okay, China is on the way there because they started slowly. I remember the Chinese New Year, this whole secondary sanction with the Chinese bank started. And now, you see, some people from Russia come to Tashkent and they're frantically looking for ways how to circumvent sanctions. And sometimes they come to our community because they're just trying to expand their networking here as much as possible. And they come and they have breakfast with us at the Tashkent Breakfast Club, and they, start asking, oh, can we do that? Can we set up here a company? It's been done before, we know, and, Americans are going after some companies here in Uzbekistan, and they warned banks as well. But I see that more and more people start coming and they explore opportunities unheard before, they're looking for opportunities unheard before. Uzbekistan all of a sudden becoming a hot point of circumventing sanctions. It means that the other windows have closed and the doors have closed. And from what I understand, it started with large banks. Large Chinese banks started refusing payments from Russia. But now the small banks at the time, they still did business. And now small banks are following the suit. And it's become impossible, well, nearly impossible to transfer money to China. And then there's fraud, a new fraud on the rise. I don't know if you heard of it, but the Chinese set up a bank real quick. Somehow they can do that. Or they buy a small bank and they contact Russian company and say, hey, we can help you out. Send money to our bank and, we'll do it, And Russians, large companies, state-owned companies, they send millions of dollars and all of a sudden people disappear from the bank and oh, it's still there, but the people are gone. So this is a new kind of fraud. And it's Russians are now afraid of transfer money just because of that. So it has been having a huge impact on. Honestly, I don't know what Russians are going to do come fall in a few months because they might start seeing first shortages.
I can see some kind of absurd comedy being written in the future about some kind of bank heists along those lines. But of course, it's serious. I mean, those people who get tricked by such a fraud, they're going to be in some serious risk with their seniors, and I expect probably even the FSB, will get involved there. So it's not a joking matter for those
You're
people, but.
suggesting fly out of the windows?
I'm suggesting some kind of, yes, defenestration of some sort or another. But the noose is tightening in other directions as well. And this is very interesting because we've had a change of government in the UK, and the language has really toughened up. Um, the previous government was pro-Ukraine very much, but we're seeing a lot more specific, and I think a lot more impact-oriented sort of language coming out of the British government. I suspect actually that action will follow that. And one of these things is it seems that Western allies, I think led by Britain, as starting to move against Russia's grey fleet of tankers that are operating in certainly the Baltic predominantly. But I suspect when there was still some power over the Black Sea through there, that route now is probably far less safe for the Grey Fleet. But they're starting to clamp down. That might push these vessels up through the Arctic, which of course is a massive environmental risk. But again, if the Allies really start to take this seriously and start to block the ability for Russia to export via its grey fleet, this must have another blow to the last legs of Putin's economy.
First of all, let me praise the UK a little bit. Well-deserved praise. Okay. Just like you said, you had a change of government, major change. The prime minister, was he resigned or he was forced to resign? I'm not sure.
He called an early election,
Uh-huh.
thinking that might give him an advantage, but quite the
But then
opposite.
once the party lost, was he forced to resign, or did he have to resign, or it was
Usually it's his decision, yes.
his decision?
I
Okay,
think,
so
yeah.
we were absolutely astonished at the Breakfast Club in the morning. Everyone came in and said, "Did you see that? Did you see the speech the guy made? He left the power voluntarily." Okay, we're not used to that. We are seeing completely opposite, the worst you can imagine possible scenario happening in our country. Okay, not just people not leaving voluntarily; they hang on to power for as much with their nails and teeth, And we were watching the former prime minister's, farewell speech, and we were just amazed. You guys are awesome. That's all I gotta say.
Do you know the other extraordinary detail that never fails to amaze me, and people and relatives I know who are not British find this amazing. Not only does the government come in and from day one after the election they start working, but the civil servants, the civil service, the administration, the chinovniki spend the several weeks before the election already working on the program of the new government. They don't know who's going to come in, but they already prepare the
Wow.
bureaucracy to start implementing the program of whichever party is going to get in. That's another extraordinary kind of detail there, the smoothness of transition.
Wow. Just wow. Anyway, back to the sanctions.
Back to them. And then there's another one, and this is going to make you laugh a little bit because, of course, Viktor Orban, who he won an election. I don't know if the recent ones have been fair or not or rigged. I think Hungarians really need to look into this. There are Hungarians who are definitely opposed to him. There are ones who probably support him, but he's been gumming things up. He's been causing problems wherever he can. And of course, he's been running backwards and forwards between Xi, Putin, Trump, really disgracing himself, I think. He's a fairly reprehensible individual. Ukraine has finally lost its temper, I think, or lost its patience rather, with Hungary. And after 2.5 years of diplomatic negotiations, a fact that surprises many, many people when I explain it, Ukraine has been transporting Russian oil and gas across its territory for the entire period of the war to supply parts of Europe, including Hungary. But it was on the condition that they would wean themselves off that supply, and they've made no efforts to do so. Ukraine has turned off the taps. So this is another extraordinary pressure. I don't know if you were looking into the story and what your thoughts were there, because I think it now is time not just to play hardball with Putin, but to really play hardball with his allies and enablers and supporters as well.
Well, Jonathan, it falls perfectly into this paradigm of the secondary sanctions. We can call this what Ukraine has done, this the secondary sanction against Orban, not direct political action, but something that he feels and his voters feel, and voters of the entire country. So that's just, it doesn't surprise me. That's all I have to say about it.
It's good, I think, that we start really focusing on victory. I think the Ukrainian victory will be very beneficial, I think, for many Russians who may start to have a chance to, get rid of their government. We don't know how that would happen or when that would happen, but a victory in Ukraine would be a good way of starting to sort of move down that path. Until now, I think the Western allies have been actually terrified of Russian collapse. That's one of the reasons why they haven't pushed as hard or supported Ukraine as much as they could. F-16s still aren't there. There's all sorts of ways in which the West have been pulling their punches, as the phrase goes. But now we've come to the point, as we were discussing earlier, that Putin is running out of everything. Do you sense in his recent speeches, his recent sort of presentations and meetings, there does seem to be a certain desperation on his part to get some kind of peace? Now, at the moment, it's not going to be peace on Ukraine's terms. It's not going to be a just peace, but he has been mentioning the word peace an awful lot. I mean, this is a fairly obvious thing to say, but do you think this desperation on his part is linked to the economic woes that we've been talking about?
Absolutely. I do sense that something is going on, that Russia is feverish, okay, and I sense that something big is coming. Well, I shouldn't say that. I sense that things will change. That's what and from about 2 weeks after the start of the war, when they couldn't capture Kiev, they couldn't do the blitzkrieg. Um, it became obvious that Putin made a mistake, a big mistake, and he thought that Ukraine would fall in 3 days, and it didn't. And then he found himself in a position in chess, it's called Zugzwang, where every move that a chess player makes put him into a worse position. And he is still it's in Zugzwang, and I think it's worsening. And it's gotten to a point where he doesn't have much room left. That's why he starts moving faster. That's why he starts explore new opportunities. He is desperately desiring to stop this thing. The war, or at least stop the active phase. Okay, he desperately wants sanctions, at least some sanctions, to be uplifted because they have started working. Okay, just like we've discussed, everyone starts feeling the heat, and he doesn't like that. He understands Russia is not going to last. Russian economy is not going to last long, and he will not last long. And I have seen the governments change overnight. Back in 1991, almighty powerful, the USSR with this incredible army with fear, KGB or the federal police. You know what? It fell apart like a card house in one night. And the Politburo was almighty powerful, rulers of people's lives, and the next morning they woke up and they were nothing. Okay, and I think they had much better luck than some of their colleagues in the Eastern European countries, if you know what I mean. So I've seen that happen, and it can happen. It can happen soon. It can happen. Heat is on. Uh, Russian diplomacy, I think everyone is trying to find a way out, or at least a way to freeze the situation. Okay, and if Putin were given a way out to save his face, then I think he would jump onto this opportunity. It's just at this point, I don't really see how such an opportunity can exist, to be honest with you.
I think he struggles to see that as well, and that comes out in a certain degree of desperation. And then, we have people like you and many of your friends in the Breakfast Club who are opposed to the war on principle grounds. There are many people that we were talking about earlier who are protesting because of economic self-interest, but there's this grouping It's estimated anywhere between sort of 50 and 25%. No one really knows, for real how that is. And this is the so-called sort of Z patriot community who generally are behind the SVO, or special military operation, or they feel it doesn't go far enough. It seems that he's starting to lose support in that quarter as well, but for very different reasons. There are, of course, the endless lies that are told in the military and the lack of success, but also because of the manpower that is being swapped out of the economy, either sent to the front or just the general lack of personnel. There's a huge number of immigrants being sucked in from other countries. And this seems to be driving certain quarters of the Z patriot community absolutely insane. In this instance, it's driven by extreme ethnic racism. But this is another unintended consequence, I think, of Putin's damage he's done to the country and the economy.
You're right on. And this is another element of Zugzwang, because they keep on losing Russian men in the front lines and fleeing the country. Just look around Tashkent, you'll see thousands and thousands of Russian men, and now their families moving from Russia to Uzbekistan to stay here, to work here, or to go to other places. And they keep on losing people, and then they have to. This is a catastrophe. Now, the latest number, I'm not sure whether it's a rumor or not, but the official number is 2.5% unemployment rate, and unofficial number 2.2%. I've never heard in my life of 2.2%. That is 40-degree fever. Okay, 41 degree. That's a huge, not stress, it's a catastrophe to the economy. Okay? There's simply no people to create products, to work, to add value to the economy. And those who are still there, they're sucked into the military industrial complex. Okay, they're attracted by high salaries. And then that puts even more pressure onto regular companies, onto the industries that are not part of the war. And yes, of course, they try to bring as many people as possible now, and even from exotic locations, Africa, North Korea, for goodness sake. Come on, people. And that is not making the Patriots happy whatsoever.
Yes, and I won't quote any of them, but there's been some extraordinary exchanges between Solovyov and some of the propagandists who are actually, some
Jonathan, I
insults
love watching that.
flying
I
between
I
them.
love watching that. I absolutely enjoy watching that stuff.
And when they get vicious against each other, I mean, they really are,
Yes.
quite vicious. Um,
Yes. Reminds me of spiders in a jar.
yes,
Finally, they start taking actions against each other.
that is it, and that eventually they will consume each other, and that's we'll get the popcorn out. Well, the very last question, and this is a topic I'm going to be exploring in a number of interviews and videos. A lot of the focus of people is on the front, what's happening on the front lines and so on. But I think strategically, this is very much turning into an energy war. And the winner will be the country that has access to most energy, that can distribute it to its population and its industries and utilize it to maintain its war effort. And we see by the actions of both Russia and Ukraine, they are trying to take out each other's energy logistics, and they're trying to seek partners to plug the gaps. And of course, when you have extreme heat in the summer and you have extreme cold in the winter, I expect that it is energy and the balance and control of energy that is actually going to determine who wins this. So this upcoming winter, I think, is going to be absolutely crucial.
It's hard to disagree with you. I think money is the foundation of the whole thing, victory over loss. But energy is right there, and there's other things too. But the energy is, yeah, as we're seeing right now, it can sparkle unrest, protest. Uh, can't say revolution really at this point, but you know what? even seeing people unhappy going to the city streets, and then cops, of course, they do what they're taught to do. They arrest them brutally. Okay, that people seeing that just you know adds a lot of. Jonathan, I can't even imagine what's coming in the winter. You see, right now, this time, always dedicated to fixing things and upgrading, renovating. So um, the winter goes by without any breakdowns, major breakdowns. Every city, every town in Russia, it's called подготовка к отопительному сезону, the preparation to the heating season, and that's hugely important. Okay, that's always a socially sensitive thing in Russia. Right now, they're not only not preparing to the heating season. They are trying to fix the problems that are happening now. And trust me, extreme heat, well, it can affect the energy system, but that's not the main reason what's happening. Okay, there are different things. So I think Russia is up for a very, very big problem this winter.
And if people want other references, Game of Thrones, Winter is Coming. Garry Kasparov also used that phrase in one of his books that sort of diagnosed what is facing Russia. But it's going to be tough on Ukraine as well. I mean, Ukraine has lost a lot of generating
I know.
capacity. So that's
They deliberately targeting energy facilities. I
Mhm.
know very well. Yeah.
Let's
Well,
hope the
to the
Allies get it
Russians,
together. And
I will be playing this. I don't know if you remember the Gazprom made a promotional video. Says the winter will be a very long one. Back in 2022, when they shut off natural gas, and they thought that Europe would freeze, and then they started televising this commercial and then singing, "Oh, this is going to be a long, long winter." 2 years later, I'm gonna be showing it back to them. It's gonna be a long winter, yes, and unfortunately for Ukrainians too. I don't know what to do. I hope that Ukraine has some kind of assistance from the West. I know they are working, but what can you do if they just the Russians just completely destroyed Tripolskaya, heat power plant right next to Kiev. I know that facility. I worked with it in the past. It's out of the system. The only thing I can think of is, supplying Ukraine with electricity, through connection between Europe and Ukraine. But I'm not an expert how that is organized.
no, I've spoken to people about that, and the Ukrainian energy system is built and it's designed to be able to export superfluous energy because traditionally Ukraine has been a net generator of electricity. So it's built
Yes.
to export. It's not, however, built to import. So mobile
It's a Soviet
generators,
system.
it's a
Let's put
Soviet,
it
yeah,
plain. It's
yeah.
one unified system of the USSR. I know it quite well, and it's easy. It's just like that to move some electricity to Ukraine or out of Ukraine to Russia. It was designed for this purpose, but it's much more difficult for other countries, non USSR countries.
I hope allies are planning right now. I mean, now during the summer heat is the time to plan for the winter. I hope there are people who are thinking strategically.
Long-term
Um,
projects, long-term. It
mhm.
takes a very long time to produce equipment. There's usually a backlog at the factories, and well, not backlog. It's just so much. There's not enough capabilities. So power transformers, plus take out of the equation, the plants that are not working in Russia right now and in Ukraine have been damaged. I'm not sure what's going on at Zaporozhye Transformator, ZTR, the place I've
Mhm.
been to myself personally. So it's difficult. whole energy industry is under great stress, and you can't fix it up easily. You can't build a power plant in 6 months or 12 months. It takes years and years of planning, financing, and executing, and so forth. So just, I'm going to be praying for everyone, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's what we can do, and make sure we carry on asking difficult questions to those people who are in a power to do this kind of planning and investment and forward thinking. Hopefully, they're watching this, because I think it's hugely instructive watching your materials. I think it's actually incredibly important at this time for strategic planners to do that and to be able to understand what's going, and actually understand how sanctions are having an effect. So, Konstantin, I'm always hugely grateful to you for spending the time to do these and to share your insights with the audience. I know from the comments, these videos are hugely appreciated by the audience. So, thank you very much.
Jonathan, thank you for having me. It's been pleasure. Another wonderful conversation, and I'm looking forward to having more in the future. Thank you.